whether it's offshoring to India or Eastern Europe or Latin America, IT is usually the first place that people think about when they're, moving work to a different country. So IT kind of validates it. Even though we had raised money, it took us a long time to get to real profitability. I had to cut my salary a lot, for a while, and hired some pretty big guns that didn't pay off like I thought they would. And every client called and said, "Hey, we got to pause or we got to cancel." And, how am I going to feed my family? Like, this is crazy. This is all my income. The word compounding, you compound resourcefulness, learning, and confidence, that you can find your way out of any situation. And all the learnings that you acquire as an entrepreneur, you use it for yourself. You never lose it.
Welcome back to the Hustle and Grind podcast, the show where we dig into why real entrepreneurs trade comfort for conviction. This isn't about vanity metrics or overnight success. It's about the stories behind building a reputation that actually matters. I'm your host, Andrew, keynote architect, platform builder, and fellow founder in the trenches. Today, I'm sitting down with Brian Samson, the founder of Plug Technologies, a leading nearshore firm connecting top talent from Latin America with U.S. companies. Brian is a true serial builder who knows how to scale. He has grown 3 separate companies from 0 to 4 million in annual recurring revenue each. For over a decade, he's been immersed in the nearshoring space, including living as an expat in Argentina. Before founding Plug, he served as a VP of talent for several key San Francisco-based tech companies, guiding them through both an IPO and an acquisition. When he's not building multi-million-dollar companies, he and his wife are strong advocates for foster care, having adopted a baby girl. Get ready for a masterclass in global team building and serial entrepreneurship. So, Brian, thank you so much for being on the show today. I really appreciate it. You're in a space that I have a particular interest in. Whenever we think outsourcing or, going to, having a developer elsewhere, what we normally think of is we think India, we think Philippines. We never think Argentina, Venezuela, Nicaragua. We don't think about Central America or South America. And so I'm really excited to have you bring kind of some of your wisdom and what you do to the audience so they can see there is other alternatives beyond kind of what we think it is. So first of all, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate you.
I'm thrilled to be here and talking about a topic that I think is getting a lot of attention.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about what your company is. In your terms, what's your ninja skill? Like, what does your company do well?
Yeah, Plug Technologies, and we connect talent in Latin America with U.S. companies. I think if you're curious about Latin America and you probably keep reading stuff, like it's in the news more, it seems like the Wild West one day and then a place that has the greatest talent in the world the next day, but you don't even know where to start. Talk to me and I could give you the playbook, kind of how to get your first hire, your first team, and start to really rock and roll out there.
Now, I know that a lot of what we think about is, well, Argentina and 400% inflation and Venezuela, which is a current big thing right now. That's what normally we think about. But we don't often think about kind of sourcing. So let's start here. What's a talent are you talking about? Are you talking about creative? Are you talking about call centers, VAs? Like what sort of talent are you talking about?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think whether it's offshoring to India or Eastern Europe or Latin America, IT is usually the first place that people think about when they're, moving work to a different country. So IT kind of validates it. Software developers, that work was, even in the the pre.com world. And if you remember the book, The World is Flat with Thomas Friedman, and he first started to talk about how, India is replacing all these jobs in the States. So that happened with Latin America. 25 years ago, we started to see more like .NET developers and old technology and, start to do jobs that probably wasn't like on the forefront of software development. So they weren't like architecting, designing. They were maintaining, doing integration work, working with legacy code, stuff like that, and kind of leaving the frothy, exciting, brand new apps, for US developers. And the world has really changed since that happened. And maybe I'll give you like a kind of a map in your audience, like a geospatial map of the world, and like where people tend to look at. So we know that China, for a long time was known as like America's junk shop,
Okay.
and I mean that in the nicest way. If you look at your house, it's probably mostly filled with things that were made in China,
Hmm.
right? And India is the place people would go for, white collar outsourcing, software development, call center, stuff like that.
Hmm.
And then the Philippines really took over as the customer service call center. We call that BPO, business process outsourcing. That was really the place for that. Eastern Europe, as we talked about, became big for, software development. But for a long time, Andrew, the world just kind of neglected Latin America. And it really wasn't until COVID hit and we saw that work could be done remotely. I don't know why every company in the world wasn't doing this anyway, but we decided that hey, work could be done remotely. Um, and all of a sudden, time zones mattered. Before we didn't really think about it. Oh, that guy's in the Philippines, he'll get back to us in the morning, or oh, this person's in India, they'll get back to us. And then once our own team, all moved to Indonesia and they're on the beaches in Bali and realize, hey, how come they're not responding? They're not on Slack. Um, all of a sudden, we value time zone because we were so used to the same time zone for core work. And that's what Latin America is taking over is core work. So you asked about what kind of jobs. You could get anything there. But you don't, what I'm not really seeing is no one's really hiring junior people there. They want what I call labor arbitrage. So they want a senior person in Latin America for what they pay a junior person in the States. So that's like kind of, you keep the cost the same, but you move really high up the value chain and what you could get. So you get creative work, you could get brand new software development, like building new products, new apps. There's call center work. And what's interesting about Latin America is although it's a large region, there's a lot of different countries there, and every country kind of has their specialty. Argentina has a lot of brand new software development, full stack developers. Mexico's really kind of taken over as the auto manufacturing and supply chain world. Nicaragua, Central America is really a great place for call center talent,
Yeah.
customer service, call center. Brazil has all sorts of data engineers and AI. And so there's some really interesting talent pockets as you start to navigate the world. My only advice is kind of stay away from the extremes. You don't really need to hire junior people. And on the senior side, it's good to have a couple executives, in the States. But otherwise, you could get everything from senior individual contributors all the way through managers and people leading teams for you in Latin America.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times, and I thought I was really good at geography until I traveled to Peru and realized they're Central Time U.S. I mean, they're all within the same time zones, so we can get what we get out of the Philippines, here in our own hemisphere, in our whatever you want to call it, but in our own time zones, and it makes it a little bit easier. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll even add, on the map, Argentina looks like it's jutted out pretty far.
Mm-hmm.
So I think depending on the year or the time of the year, it's either like 2 or 3 hours, past Eastern time.
Mm-hmm.
Until you realize that they're eating dinner at like 11 o'clock at night. So their workday perfectly maps to the
Yeah.
US,
Yeah.
like perfectly.
It's a whole lot better than the 14-hour ahead that the Philippines and India are.
Oh,
It's a
yeah.
lot easier to deal with. Yeah.
I think India even has like a point, like a 13 and a half hour difference. It's like, I couldn't do the math after a while. So that's why I'm doing nearshoring.
For those that don't know, India is one time zone. The whole country is a single time zone, and it's a half an hour off. So it's 11 and a half hours past England time. So it's like 14 and a half hours from us or something, 15 and a half. It's
Yeah.
weird. Yeah. So that's what we're talking about as far as the time zones. But yeah, I think people really overlook a lot of the benefits for that. I know I worked with a company and we hired a call center in Nicaragua to do tech
Yeah.
support, and they were very good.
Yeah.
Like they were amazing. They thought like Americans, and I think that's one thing that I've worked in the tech space for a long time. And one of the things with India is we noticed they would do exactly what we told them, no more, no less. And 20 years ago, I can remember being part of a project where we were building websites for trade magazines, and we had 30 websites to build. And so we built the first one and then outsourced the rest to India. And we had forgotten to put in this 90-page spec, 90 pages. We forgot to put the functionality to delete a user. So you could add a user, but you couldn't delete, but we didn't have it in there. So they didn't put a way to delete a user. We actually had to go through and do a change order for it. So they're very
Oh,
much to the letter.
yeah.
They will do exactly what you say.
Yeah.
And I think some of that kind of has changed inside of Latin America, where they will say, hey, do you want to also delete them? There's a little bit more process behind it.
Yeah. I think that's a really interesting point. Because Latin Americans are used to, volatility. They're used to kind of having to go with it,
Yeah.
but they're also very comfortable pushing back,
Mm.
right? And challenging you and saying, and they're very passionate, big hand movements, you
Kind of like
know,
the Italians,
yeah, especially Argentina, which is like, it's, Italian accent in Spanish, right? So lots and lots of passion. They'll tell you, Andrew, if they disagree. And it's not for everybody. If
Yeah.
you're a bit of a control freak and you have a very specific process, like 18 steps from here to there, just follow it. You don't need Latin America. India is fine,
Yeah.
and you'll save some money. But the reality is, I'm sure there's a lot of entrepreneurs listening to the show, and things kind of pivot and you have some ambiguity. You're making assumptions, not certainties.
Yeah.
It's good to have some people that can flow with it, challenge it, push back, not just read every single instruction and follow the process.
Yeah. And I think that's something we need as entrepreneurs. And a lot will go to the Philippines because it's cheap,
Yeah.
but you also get a trade off for it too. It's transactional. I
Oh,
will
yeah.
do these things, and that is it. And it's just really ingrained in the cultures over there. So it's not that they're not trying hard. It's ingrained in the cultures there and in India. But having somebody like you said, being able to arbitrage skills
Yeah.
to a country that will say something like, "Hey, this doesn't make sense. What's going on?"
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I think that's something that's a benefit to all entrepreneurs. So let's pivot for a second, because I always love to hear the story about how people got started and what they do. So
Yeah.
how did you've been doing this for 10 years now? What was your story about getting started? Were you always an entrepreneur? Is this your first time through? Have you been to this rodeo? Like
Yeah.
what's your story behind you?
Yeah. Did not grow up in an entrepreneurial family. My dad worked for the same plant for 30 plus years, and didn't have any uncles or anybody, that I could look to. So it really wasn't until I grew up in the Midwest. It wasn't until I moved to San Francisco. I was around by all these, VC funded guys from Stanford and MIT, and um, so it took me a little while, even I think, just to have the confidence, because I always had this like imposter syndrome, just being around all these people. And then 4 or 5 years of, I thought I was doing pretty good, so I got some confidence, and but I'll even say, actually, maybe only even a year into my entrepreneurship. So I have a background in talent, and I started a company called HR for Startups, and it was a good name because I was on page one of Google. If you ever typed in HR for Startups for like 4 years, and never really added any organic content, just um, like kind of SEO luck, like SEO luck before.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but where I'm going is, I had this SPHR certification, which is kind of like a CPA for HR people, and then I had done recruiting. So I started pitching that, and I guess the first thing I learned, you had talked about, your mom kind of like bought a job or owned a job,
Yeah.
and I that's the position I was in, where if I wasn't billing myself, I had no income, and so that kind of stuck with me. And then in late 2015, so a little over 10 years ago, I found an investor. I had a thesis that fintech companies, because I was working for a fintech for a little while in San Francisco. At the time, fintech companies had product people, business people, lots of capital, and totally agnostic on how their product was built. So, I think there could be something here. What if I had a company that basically built MVPs, minimum viable products, for fintech companies? So, um, put a whole business plan together, kind of learned how to do discounted cash flow and all this stuff on the fly, and somehow got lucky. Got about $2 million in funding to
Nice.
get this thing going, and then realized that didn't get me very far in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided to put my team in Argentina, and I put myself there too,
Mm-hmm.
because I wanted to, if someone investors entrusting me with this money, I want to see, how it all happens.
Yeah.
So I moved there and kind of learned how to be an entrepreneur and how to be an international entrepreneur, like all on the fly.
Yeah.
So, finding office space and doing the first couple of hires, setting up payroll, getting entities. So for some reason, I wanted to do an entrepreneur on hard mode, Um,
Isn't it always how we do it, though?
I'm thinking
Just sort of
about,
figure it
like,
out.
I used to play like sport video games. Do you want to play on rookie level, veteran level, or all
Be like
star?
insane.
I definitely wasn't ready for all star mode, but I played on it anyway, and made a million mistakes. It was hard, gruesome. The successful outcome out of that is, grew it to about 80 people. We had clients, SF, New York, and places like that. But there was a lot of pain, in the way. Even though we had raised money, it took us a long time to get to real profitability. I had to cut my salary a lot, for a while, and uh, hired some pretty big guns that didn't pay off like I thought they would, and
Yeah.
cut my salary even more, and uh, thought like I could hire salespeople to generate money, but to generate revenue. And you realize, like, as a founder, you gotta do this stuff yourself sometimes. And so anyway, we could go in a lot of different directions here, but that was really my getting started moment. And then since then, I've gotten a couple other businesses off the ground.
I think that's one thing that I've seen a bunch of different, like, memes and inspirational stuff that says that, what you see of entrepreneurship is the top of the iceberg, the money you've made, the glamorous travel, the, being the big shot, being able to go out and build something. What you don't see is like the other 2/3 of the times we've screwed up, things we've done wrong, number of times we've sat up at 2 o'clock in the morning going, what the hell have I done? You know?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it's a part of the process. That's why I think entrepreneurs, we are very strong people because we've been through so much. It's
yeah.
kind of a, it is the world's greatest therapy because if you come into the situation with any sort of issues, they are going to be handled, you know. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of people think they're doing it wrong when they run into these issues, and it's like, no, that's part of the process. You know, do you have examples of that? You know, however much you want to share, but do you have examples of time, like specific instances when it was like, here's what I had to get out of? You know, any
Yeah.
stories?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think I'll tell you two.
Yeah.
So the second company that I had, I started maybe like a year before COVID hit, and it was Latin America driven, but we were renting recruiters in Latin America for U.S. companies that were hiring U.S. candidates. So they needed like lower cost turnkey recruiters that spoke perfect English and could source a lot of candidates. Um, so a lot like really efficient. Like let's say you just raised $10 million as a company, and you need to hire 20 engineers tomorrow. Um, Call me. Here's a bunch of recruiters kind of ready to go, and they know all about Crunchbase and AngelList and Wellfound, and the right companies to target. They're not, hey, I found a Java developer at Wells Fargo. They kind of understand, the differences of that. So so anyway, that's going pretty well. Like, I couldn't believe how quickly it got to a seven-figure business, and didn't have to work too much. It was pretty hands off. And all of a sudden, COVID hit, and it seemed like I think I had like 9 or 10 clients, and like from that Monday, and I think we all remember, like, I guess the day the NBA season got canceled, and that was like, okay, COVID's for real. Um, and baseball spring training was canceled. I'm like, okay, this is it. Um, that like the week just kind of got crazier, like Wednesday, and then all of a sudden Thursday, and then Friday, it's like the world is over. And every client called and said, hey, we got to pause or we got to cancel. And, you know, how am I going to feed my family? Like, this is crazy. This is all my income.
Yeah.
Um, so that was very, very scary. I kind of hacked my way into like some other revenue, and uh, got some PPP, but that was, I think, a big wake up call for me that I needed multiple streams of income. I never wanted to be in a spot where my kids were in jeopardy of eating because I only had one income stream. About a year, no, 3 years later, the company that I have today is called Plug, and we do, nearshore software outsourcing. So developers, from all over Latin America. We put a pretty big team together. So although now I had multiple companies with sources of income, with Plug, I had massive customer concentration. So like, again, like if it's too good to be true, maybe it is. So
Mm-hmm.
it was a case of like, wow, I guess I'm kind of playing on easy mode here. We got it. We grabbed this nice client. All of a sudden, this is like a $2 million account kind of overnight.
Mm-hmm.
And we kind of wrote it for about a year. And then all of a sudden, uh, they said, "Oh, never mind. We are gonna do what we're doing with you, but build our own in-house capacity." Uh, that 30 days notice, we're kind of ramping up. And to make matters worse, they were a disaster in paying their last final bills.
Oh,
So, believe it or not, today, it's now 2026, I'm still collecting like little bits of pieces 4 years later, and these
yeah,
invoices that should have been cleared out, a long time ago.
yeah.
Um, no one tells you the stuff, by the way,
No, they don't. No.
yeah, yeah. No one tells you. So anyway, that's two of 2,000 stories that I probably could have shared.
Yeah, but I think it really reflects that one of the things we learn in the entrepreneur world is how to become resourceful.
Yeah,
Like you will, there are a lot of times when something will happen and it could be 100% not your fault, and you now have to figure out how the hell to make it go right.
yeah,
And it's interesting. It really sucks the first couple of times you do it, but then at least for me, I have found that afterwards, now no matter what's going to happen in my life, it's going to suck. Don't get me wrong, but I'm going to figure out how to deal with it.
sure.
There's so much freedom in that, in the ability to know I have the ability to do that. I have the ability to go out and, find funding if I had to. I have the ability to, hop into a project that comes along at just the right time. And I think it's something that a lot of people don't recognize inside of, unless you're in the entrepreneur world. Like people
Yeah,
don't recognize how resilient entrepreneurs are.
yeah. I think what I'll add on that is the word compounding. You compound resourcefulness, learning, and confidence. That you can find your way out of any situation, and all the learnings that you acquire as an entrepreneur, you use it for yourself. You don't you never lose it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Brian, we're getting to the end of the show. Thank you so much for being on here. I really appreciate it. Thank you for the wisdom. And thanks for letting us know a little bit more about kind of what happens in the other untapped resource, Central and South America, to be able to use them as an additional resource. So thanks for being on today, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning into the Hustle and Grind podcast, where we unpack what it really takes to build something that matters. If today's conversation hit home, do me a favor. Share it with someone who's in the trenches too. And if you're building your own brand, platform, or message and want help turning that story into serious authority, head over to theauthorityforge.com to see how we can help. Until next time, keep showing up, keep shipping, and keep chasing the work that sets you on fire. I'm Andrew, and this was the Hustle and Grind podcast.